Text, and today we're going to go over select drop downs. Okay, we're going to go over what it is and how we interact with them. Now, as I always mention, please watch our previous videos because we do take what we learned in the previous videos and build upon that on the next video, in which what we're currently watching and we're currently going to be working on. Okay, so let's talk about drop downs. Now, we have here again is our syntax practice website, which allows us to practice on certain web element types and certain conditions and things that we might come across within our Selenium, right? All the way from basic to advanced. So we can go to our drop down section. Let's click here this yellow circle with this little arrow here. Let's double click on that, scroll down, and we should see an option here that says select drop down list. Let's select that. Now, what is a drop down? Okay, now what is a select drop down? Well, we see here that this is a drop down. You guys have probably seen this on many different websites, things that we used in the past. We see here that it is almost a box, and then it has a little arrow here. Once we click the arrow, a menu pops up, and it gives us some options in order to select. Okay, that is a drop down. But why is this one called a select drop down? Well, that's pretty easy. If we right click and we go into inspect, if we go ahead and go over to our drop down right here, we see that it has a select tag. Okay, so when a drop down has a select tag, it is known as a select drop down. Okay, and in order to use this, we can go ahead and use something that Selenium gives us. It gives us a class that has many different methods that we can use in order to interact with this select drop down. Okay, I'm going to show you how this works. Also to note, not all drop downs are select tags. Okay, so it makes it pretty easy to use the select class in order to work with drop downs, if we're so lucky as to have a select drop down. And we know that by checking the element, right, by inspecting the page and seeing that the tag says select. Now, if it is a drop down, and let's say the drop down maybe had a div, we cannot use the select class that is given to us by Selenium in order to interact with the drop down. And I'll kind of briefly go over how we could do it without the select class, but in this we're going to really focus on the select class. Okay, so we see here that I have a ID of select demo, okay, for my drop down. So let's go here to my code base, and I have this pre-written just to save some time, so that way we're not going into kind of too crazy detail and taking up a lot of your time when I can explain this in about 10 minutes instead of maybe drawing this out and having it be about 20 minutes, okay? So we're trying to speed things up and give you back some more time for you guys and more time for you to practice. So what we have here, this might look like a lot at first glance, but let's break this down. We know system.setProperty, we know our Chrome driver. I put the page to our drop downs here, the URL here, and then we're going to do driver.get to our drop down URL, right? We know that, we've seen that before, we've done it a bunch of times, right? That's nothing new. So let's get to the new stuff. Right here, we have web element drop-down menu. Now, what is this? Well, this is simply me putting my drop-down web element and storing it as a variable. We don't always have to, every time we want to work with something, do driver.findElement, and then you maybe click or maybe clear, or we don't have to keep writing this statement out. If I want to work with a drop-down menu, right, work with this web element, I can simply just write it one time and store it as a variable. And as we know in Java, when we create variables, we first have to give and let Java know what are we working with, right? Well, we're working with web elements, okay? So we have web element. I gave it a name, okay? And then I have an equal and then assign its value. And its value is a web element, right? So I put the location as how we know what to do, guys, right? We know how to write this. So driver.findElement by ID select demo. And as I showed you again, it had an ID of select demo. Now, what's next? So, as I mentioned, we have what's known as a select class given to us by Selenium, okay? And as you guys know, when we're calling a new class, right, we have to create an instance of that class. We say the class name, we give it a name of our own, and it equals a new select class, okay? And inside our parentheses here, as our argument, we state the location or the locator for our dropdown so it knows which dropdown we want to work with. And as we use any class, we have to import the class, okay guys? And you'll know that you need to import it. You typically over here, it'll be underlined in red or a red X that states that we have to go ahead and import that. That's nothing new to you guys, right? So our students know that's what needs to happen, okay? Now, within the select class, now that we have this all set up, we have three options to select our drop downs, right? All of our options here, we have three different methods that we can choose from. We have select by index, select by value, and select by visible text, okay? So, let's take a look at that. I said our drop down, okay, which it's using our select class, and it's pointing to our drop down that I've chosen before, okay? I want to select my option by the index of 1. Okay, so how that's written, we simply just put drop down dot, and then you should see a menu you can come up. If it didn't automatically come up, you can hit control space, and then we can type in select, and we see select by index, select by value, select by visible text. We also see here that it's select from the select class, and there's a bunch of other options that is available to us from the select class. It gives us a lot of things we can do. You see even here it has deselect all. So if we selected an option, deselect all of them. We can deselect by index, by value, by visible text, the same way that we can choose by selection. There's a bunch of other options and methods that we can choose from, but we're going to focus on how to select an option. Okay, so we come down, we see select by index, and I can click that, and then I can simply just put an index number inside here as my argument, as I've done there. So that's pretty much the standard. When we write this, same way I've done that, I pass it as an argument, same way I called this, and I pass it as an argument. And I'll go over these. So I have my dropdown, I have my method, select by index, and I want to select my index by 1. So what does that mean? Well, that means if I go ahead, let's refresh this. If I come here to my dropdown, my very first option when it opens up is Sunday. You see this? Sunday is my first option. Number 1. Number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7. So if I chose by index of 1, it's going to choose my first option, which is Sunday. So select by index 1 will give me the option. It will select and click the option for Sunday. Now I have select by value. What does that mean? Well, hey, look, we have the value attribute here within our options, right? Within our select class, the options, which is these options that we can select, it has an attribute of value. So I chose Tuesday, okay? So it's going to go through my drop down, go through my options, and the code is going to look for the attribute value that has its value set as Tuesday, okay? Now, lastly, we have select by visible text, and I chose Friday. So, again, we see here this is value, and we have Sunday through Saturday, right? But do you see here this white lettering? That is visible text, okay? So we see here that it's going to go through all my options and go through the visible text and find the option that says Friday and select that. So I have this written just like this, right? We have our web element that I stored as a variable. I called my select class, put down in here my argument of my web element, the drop down menu that I want it to work with, And then I use the options to select them, right? I want to select by index, by value, and by visible text. And I have a couple of thread.sleeps here just to kind of pause the screen just to show you guys how it's going to select it, and you guys can see it happen, okay? So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to run, and it should select Sunday, then Tuesday, and then Friday. Here we go. Sunday, Tuesday, and then Friday. It's great. So it all works, okay guys? And as you saw, that there's many different methods here within our select class. One of which I want to go over kind of briefly, just to let you guys know. If we go ahead and say drop down, right? And then I want to call, there's a method called isMultiple, okay? So drop down is multiple. What this does is it gives us back a Boolean, okay? A yes or no statement. All right, so what it's going to do is it's going to check my drop down and see if it has the capability of selecting multiple options, okay? So as I can see here, I can't really select multiple options, only one at a time. So we'll run this so you guys can see how it runs. We'll say Boolean, we can say, we'll say status again. Actually, we'll say multi, right? We want to give it a proper name. Okay, there we go. And then I'll print this out, just so we can see what it's printing out. There we go. So let's go ahead and run this again. Let's see what a printout is. Sunday, Tuesday, Friday, and then check the multiple. We see here that the isMultiple brought us back a Boolean, a true or false statement, and it happened to be false. It does not allow me to select multiple options, okay? Now, I told you how to work with drop-downs. If it has a select tag, we can use a select class. I'm going to briefly just kind of tell you guys how we can do it. It's very simple if it did not have a select tag. All we have to do is store the drop-down as a web element, click that web element, open, as I just did, click it open, and then store one of these options as a web element and click that option. That's one way of doing it, okay? We also can go ahead and maybe capture these and maybe loop through them. There's a few different ways we can kind of go about it, but always use a select class if you have a select tag. If you don't, you might have to capture all of the values and loop through them until you get the one that you want by value, or we can simply get a locator for the value we want, open up by clicking by .click method, and click the one that we want per the locator we stored. That's how we do it without a select class, but obviously select class is easier to use, okay? A little more user-friendly. All right, everyone. Well, that is what a drop-down is. That's how we interact with them. And that's all for me today. So have a good one, guys. Make sure you practice, and happy coding.